how world leaders hope to reach net zero emissions by the year 2050 and why some experts are worried. And this has to do with fighting climate problems. Now, in part two, this is part two, Climate Fight, the World's Biggest Negotiation, a series from the Untitled podcast on the UN Climate Summit in Glasgow. And we're talking to experts about grand goal of the negotiations, reaching net zero emissions. This is by Jack Marley, Environment Energy Editor, host of Climate Fight podcast on The Conversation, James Dyke, Senior Lecturer Global Systems, University of Exeter, Mercedes Maroto-Valer, Associate Principal, Director, Research Center for Carbon Solutions, Heriot-Watt University, and Miles Allen, Professor of Geosystem Science, Director of Oxford Net Zero, University of Oxford, on The Conversation. More than 130 countries have set or are considering a target of net zero emissions by mid-century. At COP26, the annual meeting of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, which the UK is hosting this year, world leaders will be urged to submit emission reduction targets for 2030 that will put them on track to reach net zero by 2050. Real-time video coming up of pollution around the world from Null School for you to enjoy. Finally, support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below. So as you'll see, the key is on the left-hand side where we're looking at, and here we're pointing at China and India. China, as we know, is the world's polluter. For half the world's pollution comes from there. But going back to the article, they're on track to reach net zero by 2050. Now, what does net zero mean, actually? All it really means is that our dangerous interference with the Earth's climate will stop when we stop emitting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. That's what they're trying to decrease, of course. This is what James Dyke says, Senior Lecturer Global Systems at University of Exeter. With time and the world's remaining carbon budget running perilously short, net zero emissions entails not only the amounts of carbon that we will emit, Dyke explains, but also the amount of carbon that we will remove. Carbon capture and storage is one technology that climate scientists hope could help in that effort. And the producer, Tiffany Cassidy, visited the Boundary Dam coal-fired power plant in Saskatchewan, Canada, to see it in action. This is the first power station in the world to successfully use this technology, and we learned that it now captures 2/3 of its carbon emissions. So that's great. Now, it's not going to be just one technology that's going to help us to reach net zero, says Mercedes Maroto-Valer, Director of Research Center for Carbon Solutions at Heriot-Watt University. And she said it's going to be a portfolio of different technologies that are going to be ready at different times. There are options for removing carbon from the atmosphere, such as planting trees or direct air capture machines, and preventing it getting there in the first place, such as carbon capture and storage, and also replacing fossil fuels with zero carbon alternatives, such as green hydrogen. But none of them are ready to be developed at anything like the scale necessary to offset more than 40 billion tons of CO2, which countries emit every year. And as we said, most of the pollution, half of it comes from China, one country. Now, as the awesome challenge, we don't know what China, it's a communist country. What the heck do we know what's coming out of there? Whatever they say, we don't know we don't know. They censor all the news coming out, the information coming out. Now, as the awesome challenge of decarbonizing the world's bears down on us. Miles Allen, professor of geosystem science at the University of Oxford, tells us that there is no longer room for half measures. He says we did not save the ozone layer by putting a tax on deodorant. We went to the manufacturers of CFCs and just said, no, you can't produce these things that are going to destroy the ozone layer. We've got to do the same thing for fossil fuel producers. Join us, he said, host of academic experts, as we stake out the path to net zero. The Climate Fight podcast series is produced by Tiffany Cassidy, sound editing and everything by various people that are listed here. So this is, of course, the Climate Fight, the world's biggest negotiation, is a podcast series supported by UK Research and Innovation, the UK's largest public funder of research and innovation. The conversation. As far as China, with the COP26 climate conference, the report today is that Xi Jinping of China is not going to turn up. So China is expected to miss this climate conference. I wonder why. As we said before, there's just too much pollution coming out of China. We know that also they have a shortage of coal and energy, and the production is cut to about 3 working days a week. So they're saying that it's due to emission control. And as you can understand, the economy of China, let alone their property market, which is crashing, may affect the global economy in total. But now this thing here, Xi Jinping, what's he going to say? What's he going to bring to the table? Is he going to say we can't do it by 2030, 2050? Yes, that's what he's, truthfully, what's he going to say? Xi Jinping expected to miss the upcoming climate summit in Glasgow amid concerns over the world's efforts to tackle climate change. This is by David Atkins, Express UK. So according to the Times, Xi Jinping expected not to attend the upcoming climate summit in November, and the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has been notified. More than 100 world leaders are expected to join the meeting in Glasgow to talk about this. A government source told the Times there was a pessimism in the COP unit about China's movement to tackle climate change. So what are they going to do? The rest of the world is trying to fix this problem, and China just goes around belching its pollution all over the world. Over half of it is from China. The source said it's now pretty clear that Xi is not going to turn up, and the Prime Minister has been told that. What we don't know is what stance the Chinese are going to take. They could go to G20 summit in Rome in October 30th and 31st with new commitments, but that is now looking less likely. The truth is that unless China comes with new commitments, we're not going to be able to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius alive. Because, of course, half the pollution comes from them. Now, Xi Jinping has not traveled anywhere for years. He did not go to the UN General Assembly last month, and he's not going to the G20. So we'll have to see what China does rather than obsessing about who turns up. And as we said, the UN Climate Change Conference, COP26, runs between October 31st and the 12th of November in Glasgow. Countries attending expected to publish climate change targets known as National Defined Contributions, NDCs, beforehand. But according to the Times, only half of the G20 countries have put forward their plans for these targets up to now. If China does not publish its own NDC, it could jeopardize efforts to get an agreement to make sure the world maintains limited global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. China is currently responsible for 27% of global carbon emissions. Xi Jinping did attend the climate summit in 2015 in Paris, which committed to limit global warming to less than 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Now, Lori Mili-Virta, lead analyst at the Center for Research and Energy on Clean Air, spoke about China's attendance at the upcoming summit. And he said as soon as Beijing does that, it locks itself into those commitments, and the pressure in Glasgow is for them to do more. And it makes more sense for them to hold out and publish an NDC at the end of Glasgow, even if it does not go much further than their previous commitments, he said. So we'll see what happens. This is on Express UK by David Atkins and on The Conversation. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support.